Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ethics, power, and human cost. Over the next hour, we will walk the scorched streets of August 1945, stand in the shoes of scientists, soldiers, school children, and statesmen, and confront the flash that redefined war, peace, and what it means to be human. From the secret mesas of Los Alamos to the quiet paper houses of Hiroshima, from the corridors of imperial power in Tokyo to the cockpit of a silver bomber named Enola Gay, we will trace the chain reaction that began with a letter signed A. Einstein and ended with two sons born over Japanese cities. This is not just a story of physics and politics, it is a story of fire, shadows burned into walls, and voices that still whisper, why? Chapter 1, A War Without End. Imagine the tension. It is July 1945, 3 months after Hitler's suicide in a Berlin bunker, yet the Pacific burns hotter than ever. Aircraft carriers dot the ocean like steel islands, their decks trembling under the weight of corsairs and hellcats. On Okinawa, American GIs crawl through coral mud, hearing the cry of banzai charges and the whisper of kamikaze engines diving out of the morning sun. Every week, every day, casualty lists grow longer, names typed in black on fragile telegrams that will break hearts from Kansas to the Bronx. Military planners speak of Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan itself, a storm of blood expected to dwarf D-Day. Casualty estimates spiral, 250,000 Americans, perhaps 1 million Japanese, soldiers, militia, civilians, gone in the first 90 days. The war feels like a forge that will never cool. In Washington, a new president swears under his breath. Harry S. Truman, the former haberdasher from Missouri, never wanted the Oval Office this way. Now Franklin Roosevelt's ghost seems to linger in the drapery, and every morning briefing lands on his desk like a live grenade. He reads intercepted cables from Tokyo, fragments of diplomatic chatter that hint at surrender, but always wrapped in impossible conditions. The emperor must stay, the homeland must remain unoccupied, the militarists must keep their swords. Meanwhile, across the continent, in a sun-blasted valley of New Mexico, scientists in khaki shorts gamble with forces they barely understand. They speak of critical mass, of explosive lenses, of a gadget that could end everything. Truman listens, smokes, paces. He has one hand on the Bible he was sworn in on, the other on a weapon no man has ever wielded. On the other side of the world, Emperor Hirohito sits in a bomb-scarred palace, its once gilded corridors now darkened by blackout paint. Every night the air raid sirens wail earlier, every dawn the firebalm ashes swirl in the palace garden like black snow. His advisors argue in circles, some demand death before dishonor, others whisper that the unthinkable, surrender, may be the only path to save the imperial line. Yet the word itself is taboo. To speak it is to risk assassination by hot-headed young officers who still believe the spirit of Yamato will repel any invader. In the streets of Tokyo, mothers queue for rationed barley, their children's ribs showing through thin cotton. They hear rumors. The Americans are building something, a bomb that can flatten a city in an instant. They shrug. Conventional bombs already turn nights into infernos. How much worse could it be? Imagine the tension aboard the USS Indianapolis, steaming at flank speed across the Philippine Sea. Below deck, a wooden crate the size of a garden shed is lashed with chains and guarded by Marines who don't know what they guard. Inside, a uranium projectile, a steel cannon barrel, and a set of spherical plugs, components of a weapon called Little Boy. The captain has been told, if you're sunk, save that cargo first. Nothing else matters. Sailors glance aft, wonder why officers whisper, why the chaplain suddenly offers mass at odd hours. None of them realize they are ferrying the bullet that will ignite the atomic age. When the ship reaches Tinian Island, a speck of coral transformed into the largest airfield on Earth, the crate is lifted onto a flatbed truck under floodlights so bright they bleach the tropical night into silver. On Tinian, the 509th Composite Group lives in Quonset huts ringed by coconut palms. Their commander, Colonel Paul Tibbets, jogs the runway at dawn, measuring heat waves that shimmer like ghosts above the asphalt. His men fly practice missions, dropping single blockbuster bombs on Japanese-held islets, then climbing hard to 30,000 feet while instruments record shock waves. They joke that they are the best paid crews in the Army Air Forces for the least amount of ordnance, but the laughter is thin. Each man has seen classified photos. Hiroshima, a city of 300,000, built on 6 rivers, laced with wooden bridges. They study target maps printed on silk, memorize escape headings, practice corkscrew dives that will throw them beyond the blast they cannot yet imagine. At night they drink warm beer, write letters they never finish, and listen to Tokyo Rose taunt them from a crackling radio. Back in Los Alamos, Robert Oppenheimer chainsmokes in his office, a bare room with a view of pine-covered mesas. Around him, equations sprawl across blackboards like incantations. He quotes Sanskrit from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The words taste metallic, but he cannot stop repeating them. Scientists who once published papers on neutrons now sign petitions begging for a demonstration shot, anything to avoid dropping the bomb on people. Their petitions vanish into army filing cabinets. Army officers speak of morale, of the Soviet shadow already falling across Eastern Europe, of the need to shock Japan into surrender before Stalin declares war. The scientists argue ethics, the generals argue time. The clock ticks louder than either. It's hard to believe, but in the last weeks of July 1945, the outcome of the greatest conflict in human history hinges on a committee that has never seen combat. The Interim Committee, so named because it exists in the interim between war and whatever comes after, meets in a Pentagon room chilled by August air conditioning. They discuss Kyoto's temples, the shock value of instantaneous destruction, the post-war balance of power. Secretary of War Henry Stimson, 77 years old, leans on a cane carved from a Civil War battlefield. He has seen wounded boys at Antietam. He does not want to see another invasion. Yet when he imagines a city of civilians evaporated in a white flash, his hand trembles. The committee votes, recommends, adjourns. Somewhere in that moment, fate slips from the many into the hands of the few. Chapter 2, The City of Rivers and the City of Stairs. Hiroshima, founded in 1589 on a delta shaped like a human palm, has long been Japan's western gateway. By 1945 it houses the headquarters of the 2nd General Army, the force charged with repelling the expected American landing on Kyushu. Yet at dawn on August 6, the city still sleeps beneath paper walls. Streetcars clatter along tracks that gleam like wet eels, merchants lift wooden shutters, releasing the smell of fresh tofu. Children in khaki school uniforms practice marching with wooden rifles, their voices thin against the summer cicadas. On the banks of the Motoyasu River, women beat futon mattresses, sending clouds of dust into air already sticky with humidity. Above them, the sky is a porcelain bowl without a single seam of cloud, a perfect visibility, meteorologists note, for whatever may come. In a wooden house near the Aioi Bridge, 12-year-old Akiko Takahashi helps her mother fold origami cranes. They plan to deliver them to the nearby Shukayan Garden, where wounded soldiers convalesce. Akiko hums a popular song whose lyrics speak of cherry blossoms and the inevitable drift of petals to earth. She pauses, hearing the distant throb of a B-29's engines, but the air raid siren does not sound. American reconnaissance planes pass overhead daily, photographing, cataloging. Akiko returns to her cranes, each crease sharp as a knife. She does not know that her image, blurred by a photographer's lens, will later appear in U.S. briefing books labeled Target Verification, Child Density Moderate. Nagasaki, 180 miles to the southwest, climbs hills that rise like green waves from a deep-water harbor. Because of its narrow valleys, the city is called the Venice of Japan, though few foreigners remain to use the nickname. Portuguese merchants once landed here, bringing Christianity and firearms. Now only stone crosses hidden in bamboo groves testify to that era. On the morning of August 9, church bells do not ring. Metal was confiscated for war production. Instead, dock workers unload torpedoes from Mitsubishi Arms plants, their skin glistening with coal dust and sweat. A midwife named Sochiko Yamashita bicycles uphill to a house where a woman labors with her 4th child. Sachika murmurs encouragement, wipes sweat from the mother's brow, unaware that the valley outside acts like a natural amphitheater, concentrating blast and heat. Imagine the tension in the minds of the bombardiers who studied these cities from 30,000 feet. They see not people but aiming points, the T-shaped AIOI bridge, the Mitsubishi Steelworks, the torpedo factory roof painted battleship grey. They have been told that Hiroshima is largely intact, chosen so that the bomb's effects can be measured without the clutter of previous damage. The phrase tastes obscene, but they repeat it anyway. In the nose of the Enola Gay, bombardier Thomas Farabee sets his Norden bomb sight on the bridge, adjusting for wind drift, temperature, the curvature of the Earth. His finger hovers over the toggle switch that will release a single bomb weighing 5 tons yet carrying the explosive force of 15,000 tons of TNT. He thinks of his hometown in North Carolina, of the creek where he fished as a boy, and wonders whether any place will ever feel that innocent again. Back on the ground, 8-year-old Tetsuo Nakamura sells newspapers at Hiroshima Station. The headline proclaims decisive battle approaches, 100 million hearts beat as one. He shouts the words, voice cracking, hoping for a tip. A soldier in a faded uniform buys a paper, ruffles Tetsuo's hair, then boards a train bound for the southern coast. The soldier carries a wrapped package, his family's ancestral sword, returned to him after his brother's death in the Philippines. He plans to die with that blade, ideally taking an American tank crew with him. The train whistles twice, lurches toward the horizon. Tetsuo watches until the last car disappears, then counts his coins, just enough for a single rice ball. He eats it. Beneath a plane tree whose leaves flicker silver in the breeze, unaware that in 40 minutes those leaves will ignite like thousands of tiny torches. In Nagasaki's Urakami district, the spiritual heart of Japanese Christianity, Father Hugo Enemiah Lasalle kneels in a cathedral built only 50 years earlier. He recites the Mass in Latin, voice echoing off brick walls that survived earlier persecution. 30 parishioners bow their heads, some wear rosaries carved from olive wood smuggled by Portuguese traders centuries ago. Outside, children chase dragonflies through rice paddies that climb the hillside in terrace steps. One girl, Sadako Tanaka, stops to tie her shoe beneath a camphor tree. She looks up, sees a lone B-29 skirting the clouds, and waves because American planes sometimes drop candy. She does not know that this plane, boxcar, carries a plutonium core nicknamed Fat Man, and that the valley will soon become a crucible. It's hard to believe, but in the final hours, the greatest variable is weather. Over Hiroshima, a high-pressure system promises clear skies. Over Kokura, the primary target for the second bomb, clouds thicken like cotton soaked in oil. In the war room on Tinian, meteorologists stab at maps with grease pencils, arguing fronts and visibility. Their decision will divert Boxcar to Nagasaki, a secondary target chosen weeks earlier for its hilly topography, perfect, engineers say, for containing and measuring blast effects. The word containing is typed into a report that will be stamped top secret and locked into a safe. No one asks what containment means for the people who live between those hills. Imagine the tension inside the briefing hut as Tibbets addresses his crew. He speaks of pride, of history, of the lives their mission might save. Yet when he dismisses them, he lingers, staring at a photograph of his own mother, her name painted on the bomber's nose. He wonders whether naming a weapon after a woman who sang lullabies is a tribute or a curse. The crew boards trucks that smell of diesel and coral dust. Floodlights carve white tunnels through the tropical night, illuminating the Enola Gay like a stage set. Somewhere in the distance, a marine bugler plays taps, though no one ordered it. The sound drifts across the tarmac, soft as a lullaby, sharp as a blade. Chapter 3, 8:15, A sun rises at breakfast time. At 2:45 a.m. on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay lifts off, its 65-ton bulk groaning against gravity. The runway lights dim behind, leaving only the moon to silver the ocean. Inside, the crew tests their intercoms, voices crackling like campfire sparks. They climb through layers of cloud, break into a sky so star-strewn it feels like trespassing on a cathedral ceiling. Navigator Theodore Van Kirk marks drift lines, while radio operator Richard Nelson taps out position reports in code. No one speaks of the payload, the word bomb feels too small. Instead, they call it the package, as if they are mere delivery boys for an order no one remembers placing. As the plane approaches Iwo Jima, the sun rises ahead, a red disk that seems to bleed across the horizon. Tibbet's banks left, circles the island so that photography plane the great artiste can catch up. Below, Mount Suribachi squats like a dark tumor, its slopes still littered with rusted helmets and bones. The crew thinks of Marines who died there, of letters they wrote to mothers that began, "He died instantly, felt no pain." They tell themselves today's mission will prevent more such letters, but the math feels slippery. At 6:40 a.m., they set course for mainland Japan, altitude 30,000 feet, airspeed 200 knots. The sky turns porcelain blue, the ocean below wrinkles like old tin. Time narrows to the metronome of engines. Over Hiroshima, the all-clear sounds at 7:09 a.m. after a lone reconnaissance plane departs. Citizens emerge from shelters, restart trams, light kitchen fires. In a classroom, students open arithmetic books, a teacher chalks the character fourth piece on a blackboard scabbed with shrapnel scars. At 7:25, the Enola Gay's radar operator picks up the coast. Tibbet speaks the code phrase, "It's Hiroshima all right." Climb to bombing altitude. The word climb feels like a prayer. They ascend to 31,000 feet, where air is so thin it makes gums bleed. Bombardier Farabi lies prone behind his northern sight, eye pressed to rubber, breath fogging the lens. He whispers coordinates like a litany, latitude 34.4, longitude 132.5. The city swells below, rivers glinting like thrown silver coins. At 8:12 a.m., the plane's bomb bay doors yawn open. A rush of cold air tumbles through the fuselage, someone curses as a clipboard flutters away. The package descends on a single shackle, its green steel skin painted with autographs and lewd limericks. It falls for 44 seconds, stabilizing fin spinning like a child's toy. Inside, a uranium bullet races down a gun barrel toward a uranium target. When the two meet, 0.6 grams of matter will convert into energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. Farabi counts, 10, 9, at 0. The bomb detonates 1,900 feet above the Aioi bridge. There is no sound at first, only light, white and absolute, as if God has struck a match against the sky. Imagine standing on the ground beneath that flash. Time fractures. A photographer on the roof of the Fukuya department store snaps a picture, his camera melts into his hands. A streetcar halfway across the bridge vaporizes, leaving only shadow outlines on the decking. Roof tiles bubble like lava. Humans within half a mile simply disappear, their silhouettes etched onto walls as charcoal negatives. Farther out, clothes ignite, skin peels like wet paper. Akiko, the girl folding cranes, feels her cotton kimono turn to flame. She runs, arms pumping, until she collapses into the river alongside hundreds who believe water will save them. The river boils. It's hard to believe, but some survivors will later describe the smell as sweet, like grilled squid, before they realize it is the odor of their own flesh. Above, the Enola Gay lurches as if punched by an invisible fist. Tibbet fights controls that suddenly feel alive, rebellious. A second sun blooms beneath them, a roiling sphere of orange and purple that climbs, climbs, climbs. Shockwave follows, a metallic clang that rattles teeth. The plane rises like a surfboard on a tsunami of air. Crew members later say they tasted lead at the back of their throats. They watch the city disappear under a mushroom cloud that swells to 45,000 feet, its stem churning with fire and dirt and the pulverized remains of 70,000 souls. Navigator Van Kirk scribbles in his log, results excellent. The word hovers on the page, obscene in its inadequacy. On the ground, Dr. Terufumi Sasaki, a Red Cross physician, staggers from a collapsed operating room. His white coat is now red-brown, soaked with blood from patients who were on the table when the ceiling fell. He smells burning hair, hears a chorus of moans that seem to rise from the earth itself. He ties a strip of gauze around his own bleeding forehead and begins to walk toward the epicenter, though every instinct screams to flee. Along the way, he sees a woman whose eyeballs hang by optic threads, a boy clutching a melted lunch tin that still steams. Dr. Sasaki will later recall that the most common word he heard that day was imizu, water. People beg for it, crawl for it, die with their mouths open to the rain that will fall, black and radioactive, at dusk. By nightfall, Hiroshima resembles the surface of the moon lit by bonfires. Bodies line the riverbanks like cordwood, some are charred to the consistency of charcoal, others swollen to twice normal size by internal gases. Survivors, skin hanging in strips, shuffle in silence, arms outstretched like sleepwalkers. A priest sprinkles holy water, it evaporates before touching the ground. Fires merge into a single inferno that sucks wind through the valleys, creating firestorms with winds of 60 miles per hour. Paper houses flare, then vanish, stone temples crack, then crumble. Overhead, the mushroom cloud spreads into an anvil shape that blots out stars. Somewhere inside it, carbon from vaporized humans rises into the stratosphere, later to descend as radioactive soot. The world has entered a new grammar, no longer cities destroyed, but cities erased. Chapter 4, The Second Sun, Nagasaki's Turn Under a Clouded Sky. 3 days later, dawn breaks bruised and clouded over Kyushu. At 3:47 a.m., Boxcar lifts off Tinian with Fat Man nestled in its belly, a plutonium implosion bomb more complex and powerful than its uranium cousin. The crew is tired, edgy, they have flown the long haul to Kokura yesterday only to find it obscured by smoke from a previous firebombing. Now they joke grimly that they're the only bomber in history to carry an atomic weapon back home like excess baggage. Major Charles Sweeney, pilot and Catholic, fingers a rosary in his pocket while checking fuel gauges. The plane is heavier than Enola Gay, its bomb shorter, fatter, adorned with crudely painted caricatures of Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. Someone has scrawled, to Hirohito, with love on the nose. The humor feels forced, like laughter at a wake. At 9:50 a.m., they approach Kokura again, but clouds clamp tight over the arsenal. Anti-aircraft fire blooms black puffs around them, flak rattles like hail on a tin roof. Sweeney circles once, twice, burning precious fuel. The bombardier peers through the northern sight, sees nothing but woolly grey. Protocol is explicit, visual drop only. In the tail, radar operator Ed Buckley sweats through his flight suit, he knows they have enough fuel for only one pass over the secondary target before a potential ocean ditching. Sweeney banks southwest, radios Tinian, going to Nagasaki. Clouds 8/10. Will attempt. The phrase lands in a Pentagon inbox, is typed onto a form, filed under operational updates. No one asks what 8/10 cloud cover means for the people beneath. Nagasaki, meanwhile, prepares for an ordinary Monday. At the Mitsubishi torpedo plant, morning shift whistles shriek, women in headscarves file past guards who search for contraband rice. In the Urakami Valley, Father LaSalle finishes mass, steps outside, notices the wind has shifted, clouds part like theater curtains. Sunlight spills across terraced fields, glints off cathedral spires. Children run to school, clogs clacking on cobblestones. A pharmacist labels iodine bottles, humming a folk tune about cranes that fly to heaven. Above, Boxcar descends to 28,000 feet, skirting clouds that drift like islands of cotton. At 11:01 a.m., the bombardier acquires visual contact on the Mitsubishi sports field, a rectangular patch of brown amid green. He flips the toggle. Fat Man drops, falls for 43 seconds, detonates at 1,650 feet. The blast is off-target by 2 miles, but Nagasaki's geography magnifies destruction. Hills funnel shockwaves into the valley, doubling their force. The cathedral vanishes, its bell lands half a mile away, still tolling from momentum. A streetcar leaps its tracks, tumbles into a rice paddy where farmers are instantly vaporized, their shadows etched into terraced walls. The torpedo plant becomes a crater of twisted girders, molten steel rains like silver sleet. Sadako, the girl who waved at bombers, is running an errand for her mother when the flash hits. She becomes a silhouette on a stone wall, arms outstretched, a permanent shadow that tourists will photograph decades later. The river Urakami turns to steam, fish float belly up, eyes cooked white. A doctor named Takashi Nogai, wounded in the chest by flying glass, staggers to his hospital, finds only a pile of smoking timbers. He will spend the next 5 years documenting what he calls the echo of hell. Above, Boxcar rocks violently, Sweeney feels the controls go slack, then grab again. Fuel gauges hover near empty. He orders the radio operator to send an uncoded distress, "Mayday, Mayday, this is Boxcar, priority fuel." They jettison everything not bolted down, machine guns, ammunition, even a thermos of coffee, trying to gain altitude for the ride to Okinawa. Below, the mushroom cloud over Nagasaki is darker, angrier than Hiroshima's, tinged with industrial soot. It rises 50,000 feet, its cap spreading like an evil lotus. Photography Officer Lieutenant James Oliver Ames. His camera, but his hands shake so badly the images blur. He will later tell investigators, it wasn't fear. It was shame. Pure shame. On the ground, midwife Sachiko regains consciousness beneath a collapsed beam. Her patient and the newborn are gone, only a tiny handprint remains pressed into a tatami mat. She crawls toward the cathedral, hears someone singing the Kyrie in Latin. The voice belongs to a nun whose face has been flayed to muscle, she dies mid-song. Sachiko will later describe the air as thick, like breathing molten glass. She joins a procession of survivors climbing the hills, their skin hanging like tattered kimonos. Every so often, a figure drops, simply sits, and never rises again. By dusk, fires merge into a single furnace that reflects off the harbor, turning the water the color of blood. American POWs in a camp on the outskirts feel the heat, believe they are hallucinating. One, a tail gunner named Joe Kiyumiya, will survive both the blast and subsequent lynching attempts by enraged civilians who think he summoned the sun. Word reaches Tokyo in fragments. Emperor Hirohito, inspecting bomb damage in his garden, hears an aide whisper, a second atomic bomb has fallen on Nagasaki. The sentence seems to hang in the humid air like incense. The emperor closes his eyes, sees not mushroom clouds but scrolls of poetry written by his ancestors, verses about cherry blossoms and impermanence. He enters an underground shelter, meets with advisors whose faces glow green under battery lamps. They argue, surrender means occupation, possible abolition of the throne, continued war means more cities turn to glass. For the first time in his reign, Hirohito speaks over the cacophony, we must bear the unbearable. The phrase will later be quoted in textbooks, but tonight it is only a whisper in a concrete bunker that smells of sweat and fear. Outside, the night wind carries the faint smell of burning flesh from 600 miles away. Imagine the tension in Washington when news arrives. Truman is aboard the USS Augusta, returning from Potsdam. A sailor hands him a cable, second bomb dropped Nagasaki. Results good. The president pockets the paper, joins officers for lunch, eats ham steak as if it were any other Tuesday. Yet later, in his cabin, he writes in his diary, I fear the world will not forgive us, but I fear more the invasion that did not happen. The sentence ends in a blot of ink, as if the pen itself recoiled. Across the ocean, scientists at Los Alamos pop champagne corks, then fall silent when photographs arrive, shadows of human beings burned into stone. One young physicist vomits on his slide rule. Oppenheimer leaves the party early, walks into the desert, drops to his knees, and scoops sand that still holds the day's heat. It feels like ash. Chapter 5, The Surrender, An Emperor's Voice, A Nation's Silence. Imagine the tension inside the imperial shelter on the night of August 9, 1945. The walls, thick concrete laced with bamboo fiber, sweat with humidity and fear. Generals in sweat-stained tunics argue over sake cups and battle maps, their voices cracking like old parchment. Admiral Toyoda insists the Navy can still fight, General Anami slams his fist, swearing that 100 million Japanese souls will resist invasion with bamboo spears if necessary. Between them sits Emperor Hirohito, small, immaculate, his white gloves resting on his knees like resting doves. He has never spoken in council before, protocol forbids it, but tonight the air itself seems to beg for a single human voice to rise above the static of pride. At 2 a.m. August 10th, the Emperor stands. The room falls silent so abruptly that the buzzing of a lone fly becomes a roar. In a high, almost whispered monotone, he recites a poem his grandfather Meiji wrote about waves that erode stone, the rugged cliffs of time may crumble, yet the sea endures. Then, switching to formal Japanese, he says, we must endure the unendurable and bear the unbearable. Tears streak the cheeks of hardened generals, some bow so low their foreheads touch the concrete. The recording that will become the Gyokuan Hoso, the dual-voice broadcast, is cut the next morning on a 12-inch lacquer disc, the stylus trembling as if it, too, fears the future. Technicians hide the disc inside a linen bag, fearing assassination plots by officers who vow to protect the emperor from his own weakness. Across the Pacific, President Truman receives word of Japan's conditional surrender aboard the Augusta. The ship's chaplain offers a prayer of thanks, sailors cheer until their throats rasp. Yet in the wardroom, Truman stares at a single sentence in the cable, provided that the prerogatives of His Majesty as a sovereign ruler are not prejudiced. He taps ash from a cigarette, murmurs, "The boys want to go home, but we can't let the emperor stay a god." Secretary of State Burns drafts a reply, "The emperor's authority will be subject to the supreme commander of Allied powers." The cable departs at dusk, riding radio waves that skim the ionosphere like skipping stones. Somewhere above the Mariana Trench, the message passes through the same sky where B-29s once ferried fire. Back in Tokyo, militarist officers plot a coup they call the divine wind of the August sky. They forge orders, move palace guards, plan to steal the lacquer disc before it can be broadcast. At midnight August 14th, Major Kenji Hatanaka bursts into the palace, pistol drawn, searching for the recording. He finds instead a moonlit courtyard of crickets and silence. Loyal aides have hidden the disc inside a rice bucket. At dawn, Hatanaka rides a stolen motorcycle through empty streets, weeping, shooting his pistol at the rising sun. By noon he kneels on the Imperial Plaza, places the muzzle under his chin, and pulls the trigger. His blood soaks into gravel that will sprout weeds within weeks, fertilized by the same soil that once bore cherry blossoms. At noon August 15th, radios crackle across the Japanese archipelago. Citizens kneel in city squares, in rice paddies, in factory yards. Akiko, the girl who folded cranes, lies on a hospital cot, her face bandaged with gauze that sticks to weeping burns. Through static, the emperor's voice emerges, high, archaic, almost unintelligible. Most listeners cannot understand the court dialect, yet the tremor in that voice needs no translation. In Nagasaki's hills, midwife Sachiko holds an orphaned infant to her breast, feels the child's heartbeat flutter against her own. When the broadcast ends, the square remains silent, no one moves, as if the world itself pauses to exhale. Then a single woman wails, a sound that rips open the sky. The war is over, but grief has only begun its march. In Washington, a photographer captures Truman grinning broadly, flashing the V for victory. In Hiroshima, a photographer captures a mother digging a hole with her bare hands, placing a child's charred sandal inside. Both images will appear on front pages the same morning, one under the headline, Peace, the other buried inside under Aftermath. Readers will flip past, sip coffee, turn to baseball scores. Yet somewhere between those pages lies the truth: surrender is not an end but a doorway, and the threshold is strewn with shadows that lengthen with every passing year. Imagine the tension aboard American troop transports steaming toward Japan. GIs who rehearsed beach landings now toss helmets into the sea, watching them spin like coins into blue infinity. One private, who kept a diary counting down days to the invasion, rips out pages, lets them flutter away like white doves. Yet below deck, a chaplain organizes a memorial service for comrades who died on Okinawa, men who will never know the war ended without them. The hymn "Abide with Me" rises above engine noise, carried on voices that crack not from fatigue but from the unbearable weight of being alive. The sea listens, rolls on, indifferent as time itself. Chapter 6, Shadows Under the Rising Sun, Occupation and Aftermath. On August 28, the first American boots touch Japanese soil, not as invaders but as occupiers bearing chocolate and cigarettes. General MacArthur steps onto Atsugi Airfield wearing sunglasses that reflect a sky still dusted with radioactive ash. He refuses a ceremonial sword, instead patting Japanese children on the head, a gesture that will become front-page law. Yet behind the cameras, engineers in lead-lined gloves measure radiation levels with Geiger counters that click like metallic cicadas. They mark hot zones with chalk symbols civilians cannot read. Housewives sweep their steps unaware that the dust they stir carries death on microscopic wings. In Hiroshima, Dr. Sasaki converts a school into a makeshift clinic. Patients line the corridors, their skin hanging in blackened strips that smell of iron and burnt pork. There is no morphine, he offers saltwater and whispered lullabies. A girl named Sadako, no relation to the shadow on the wall, arrives with no visible wounds, only a persistent fever. Months later, her lymph nodes swell like hidden plums. She will fold 1,000 cranes in a race against leukemia, her story folded into every crane that school children still string today. Dr. Sasaki keeps her final crane in a glass jar, a paper bone too fragile to touch. Nagasaki's hills echo with the clack of hammers. Prisoners of war, emaciated but alive, build wooden shacks for orphans whose eyes reflect nothing. A Catholic nun finds a rosary melted into the shape of a teardrop. She threads it onto twine, wears it as a brooch. American journalists arrive, notebook pages fluttering like wounded birds. They ask, "How do you feel about the bomb?" The nun replies, "Ask the wind." It carries the names. One reporter weeps, sends copy that never reaches print. Editors deem it too poetic for news. Instead, headlines read, "Japs quit, atom bomb wins war." The font is bold, triumphant, black as fresh graves. Imagine the tension in a Tokyo courtroom 1946, where war crimes trials begin. Former Prime Minister Tojo sits stiff, spectacles cracked, listening to translators speak of atrocities in China, of Bataan, of Pearl Harbor. Nowhere in the indictment is there mention of Hiroshima or Nagasaki. The victors write the ledger. In the gallery, an American airman who flew on both missions clenches his program, wonders whether he should feel hero or witness. That night he writes a letter to his wife, seals it without postage, stores it in a drawer that will not be opened until his death 40 years later. The letter ends, "We ended the war, but I'm not sure we ended the killing." Across the Pacific, scientists return to universities, resume teaching periodic tables that now include a new element, plutonium, named for the god of the underworld. In Berkeley, a young grad student asks Oppenheimer to sign her thesis. He hesitates, then writes, "Physics is a human endeavor, never forget the humans." She will later become a leading advocate for nuclear disarmament, her office wall bearing a photograph of that signed title page, the ink faded to the color of dried blood. Every semester she plays the Enola Gay cockpit recording for her students, lets them hear the cheer that followed the blast. She asks, what did they cheer for, victory or survival? The classroom falls silent so deep they can hear the fluorescent lights hum like distant bombers. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb. Truman, now a private citizen, hears the news while shaving. He nicks his cheek, watches blood swirl into shaving cream like a miniature mushroom cloud. That evening he drinks bourbon on the porch, tells his daughter, "I thought we bought time. Maybe we just bought a bigger clock." The arms race begins, ticking across decades, across continents, across childhood nightmares where school children duck beneath desks that promise no shelter. Hiroshima and Nagasaki become proper nouns in every language, synonyms for both ending and beginning. The shadows beneath the rising sun lengthen, stretch across generations, refusing to fade. Chapter 7, The Doctor's Dilemma, Science, Conscience, and the Atom. At Los Alamos, the mood after surrender is less triumph than hangover. Scientists who celebrated with champagne now wander corridors smelling of burnt coffee and regret. A committee drafts a petition urging international control of atomic energy. It gathers 67 signatures before security officers confiscate it. Leo Szilard, the Hungarian physicist who first conceived the chain reaction, flies to Washington clutching a report titled The Atomic Bomb and the Future of Man. He is denied an audience with the president, told instead to book a commercial flight like any civilian. On the plane he sits next to a soldier who asks, "Are you famous?" Szilard replies, "I'm infamous." The soldier nods, returns to a comic book whose hero throws lightning bolts that look remarkably like nuclear explosions. In Hiroshima, American doctors arrive with Geiger counters and clipboards. They measure chromosome damage in survivors, label them hibakusha, explosion-affected people. The term becomes both medical and social, a brand that prevents marriage, employment, sometimes even burial in family plots. Dr. James Neal, a geneticist, collects blood samples, promises follow-up care that will arrive sporadically, if at all. A mother asks, "Will my unborn child be normal?" He answers honestly, "We don't know." His report, classified until 1972, concludes that psychological trauma exceeds radiation damage, a finding buried beneath red tape like bodies beneath rubble. Years later, his own daughter will develop thyroid cancer. He will wonder, privately, if guilt can mutate genes. Imagine the tension in a 1950 congressional hearing when Oppenheimer testifies against developing the hydrogen bomb. His voice, once crisp with certainty, now quavers. He quotes the Bhagavad Gita again, but this time the words sound hollow, as if recited in an empty cathedral. Congressman asks, "Are you a security risk?" He replies, "I am a risk to secrecy, not to security." The distinction is lost, his security clearance is revoked. Walking out, he passes a newspaper headline, "Father of Atomic Bomb Opposes H-Bomb." A stranger spits at his feet. That night he dreams of a ladder reaching into a sky filled with brighter, ever brighter suns. He climbs, but each rung burns away before he can grasp the next. Meanwhile, Japanese physicians publish findings on atomic sickness in English-language journals that Western editors refuse to print, too anecdotal, too emotional. Dr. Takashi Nogai, dying of leukemia himself, writes The Bells of Nagasaki, a manuscript rejected by U.S. publishers for lack of objectivity. He self-publishes on mimeograph ink that smells of alcohol and resignation. The first copy sells for the price of a bowl of rice. Students pawn textbooks to buy it. A decade later, it becomes required reading in Japanese middle schools, yet American editions still carry a foreword reminding readers that the bomb ended the war and saved lives. The contradiction hangs like smoke that never quite clears. In 1955, 12-year-old Sadako Sasaki dies in a Hiroshima hospital, her 1,000th crane folded from medicine wrappings. Classmates finish the remaining birds, bury them with her. The story travels the world, translated into 20 languages, transformed into a peace anthem. Yet when her family requests a memorial in the Hiroshima Peace Park, some American donors object. They want a monument to all war dead, not just bomb victims. A compromise is reached. The statue will be called Children's Peace Monument, universal in name, specific in memory. Every year, millions of cranes arrive by mail, strung into rainbow garlands that flutter in wind that smells of paper and camphor. It's hard to believe, but some of the paper is recycled from nuclear disarmament flyers printed in the United States, origami folded from words that once promised never again. Chapter 8, Cold War Rising, From Ashes to Arms Race. By 1960, Hiroshima's skyline sprouts concrete rectangles that gleam like false teeth. Tour buses disgorge sightseers who buy keychains shaped like mushroom clouds, novelties sold alongside origami cranes. A teenager named Kenji, born 2 weeks after the blast, guides Americans in flawless English learned from occupation soldiers. He points to the atomic dome, its skeletal cupola frozen mid-collapse, and says, "This is our conscience." Tourists nod, snap photos, ask where to find good sushi. Kenji smiles, but at night he dreams of shadows burned into bridges, shadows that look, inexplicably, like his own face. He will later move to California, become a nuclear engineer, design reactor shields he hopes will never be tested. In Nevada deserts, a new generation of soldiers crouches in trenches, backs turned to ground zero. They wear no protection. The exercise measures psychological response to atomic attack. When the flash hits, some cheer, some weep, some soil their uniforms. A sergeant later develops cataracts shaped like tiny suns. An ophthalmologist records the pattern, publishes a paper, wins an award. The soldiers are told they are heroes of science. One private, unable to sleep, writes haiku on bunk bed slats. Bright sun twice risen and my shadow stays in Nevada and my soul walks in ash. The bunk is burned when he ships out. The haiku drifts into desert wind, settles among Joshua trees that will outlive every witness. Imagine the tension in October 1962, when Cuban missiles carry warheads 50 times more powerful than Little Boy. In Hiroshima, survivors gather at the Peace Park, hold hands, listen to radio static that could become a siren. A woman named Akiko, her burns now smooth scars, whispers, "If the world wants another sun, let it rise here where we already know the darkness." Her words are captured by a visiting journalist, buried on page 6 beneath stock market numbers. In Washington, Kennedy's advisors debate strike options. No one mentions that the combined yield of Soviet missiles equals 4,000 Hiroshimas. The math is too large to taste, too abstract to fear. The crisis passes, but somewhere in a Moscow bunker a Soviet officer keeps a photo of Nagasaki's cathedral bell, a reminder that victory and ruin are spelled with the same Cyrillic letters. In 1965, the US deploys troops to Vietnam. Napalm replaces atomic bombs, yet survivors of 1945 recognize the smell: sweet, cloying, human fat rendered into fuel. A Hiroshima doctor travels to Saigon, treats children whose skin peels like paper. He writes home, "We did not end war, we only changed its perfume." The letter is read aloud at a peace symposium, receives polite applause, is forgotten by dessert. Meanwhile, nuclear arsenals swell to 40,000 warheads, enough to erase every city ever built, with enough left over for the villages. Strategists call it overkill, poets call it undercompassion. Both terms enter dictionaries, neither enters conscience. By 1980, Hiroshima's mayor launches a campaign to send paper cranes to every head of state. President Carter receives 10,000, strings them across the Oval Office ceiling. Photographers capture the moment, the image wins a Pulitzer. Months later, Carter authorizes development of the neutron bomb, radiation that kills people while sparing buildings. A reporter asks about the cranes. Carter replies, "Symbols are for peace, policy is for reality." The cranes remain overhead, swaying gently whenever the air conditioning cycles, like miniature ghosts unsure whether to stay or fly away. Chapter 9: Memory in Marble, Museums, Monuments, and the Making of Meaning. In 1955, the Hiroshima Peace Museum opens, its curved concrete designed to echo the atomic dome across the river. Inside, a wristwatch stopped at 8:15, its crystal melted into a teardrop. School children file past, whispering, until a teacher snaps, "No talking." The same command once given during air raid drills. A boy named Hiroshi steals a glance at a wax figure of a mother shielding an infant, both charred to the color of burnt caramel. That night he asks his father, "Were you a baby then?" The father, a tram conductor who survived by chance illness, can only nod. Years later, Hiroshi becomes a curator, changes the exhibit to include recordings of survivors' voices. Visitors now hear, not silence, the word "Mizu" repeated like a heartbeat. Nagasaki's museum takes longer, the city is poorer, the hills steeper, grief more tucked away. When it finally opens in 1965, the centerpiece is a section of cathedral wall fused into a glassy slab. A plaque reads, "Human culture is fragile, human compassion must not be." Tourists touch the surface, leave fingerprints that blur like moral boundaries. An American veteran leaves a Purple Heart medal beside the wall, security cameras record him weeping, but no one stops him. The medal remains, unexplained, until a descent threads it onto a wire stand labeled "Anonymous Offering." Every evening she polishes it, as if shine could scrub conscience clean. Imagine the tension in 1995, the 50th anniversary, when the Smithsonian attempts to exhibit the Enola Gay intact. Veterans groups demand celebration, peace groups demand context. Protesters chain themselves to the fuselage, congressmen threaten funding. The exhibit is scaled back to a single placard, "The atomic bomb ended the war." Akiko, now a grandmother, travels to Washington, stands outside the Air and Space Museum holding a single crane. No one takes it. She returns home, places the crane in a shrine beside her father's watch, hand still fused at 8:15. The next day she begins folding another 1,000, not for peace but for memory, because she realizes memory is the only antidote to forgetting. In 2001, a group of high school students in Los Alamos interviews elderly scientists for an oral history project. One physicist, 89, blind, says, "I still see the light whenever I blink." He asks the students to describe the color of today's sky, they answer blue with contrails. He nods, whispers, "Same sky, different ending." The recording is archived in a digital folder labeled Legacy Interviews, password protected because some responses mention classified details. A decade later, a student who became a journalist leaks excerpts. They trend on social media for 6 hours, then vanish beneath celebrity gossip. The sky remains blue, contrails thicken, the light keeps blinking. By 2010, Hiroshima streetcars again clang across rebuilt bridges. Commuters wear earbuds, scrolling phones that contain more computing power than the entire Manhattan Project. Yet every August 6 at 8:15, the city pauses. Traffic lights blink red, drivers step out, bow heads. A tourist live streams the moment, comments scroll, why stop traffic? Respect! Move on already. The streamer, a teenager from Ohio, later edits the footage into a TikTok montage set to lo-fi beats. It receives 2.3 million views, 1.4 million likes, and 3,000 comments arguing whether the bombing was justified. The algorithm promotes it, ad revenue rolls in. The teenager donates half to a peace NGO, keeps half for college. Memory becomes content, content becomes commerce, commerce becomes, what? The streetcar bell answers, a single metallic note that refuses translation. Chapter 10, Echoes in the Nuclear Age, Tests, Treaties, and the Edge of Tomorrow. In January 2022, the doomsday clock stands at 100 seconds to midnight, closer than during the Cuban crisis. Hiroshima survivors zoom into a UN conference, their faces pixelated yet unflinching. A diplomat from a newly nuclear nation yawns, checks his phone. Akiko, now 89, speaks, I have lived 77 years since my cranes burned. The world has 13,000 warheads. How many cranes will you fold? The translator's voice cracks, the diplomat looks up, momentarily ashamed, then votes against a non-proliferation resolution because national interest prevails. The session ends with applause for procedural efficiency. Outside, New York traffic flows like any other Tuesday. In a classroom in Nairobi, students build a mock reactor from soda cans and LED lights. Their teacher, a Fulbright scholar from Nagasaki, shows them a paper crane smaller than a fingernail. She explains half-life, radiation sickness, the mathematics of deterrence. One boy raises his hand, if mutual assured destruction works, why do we still fear? She has no answer, only a silence that feels like the moment after thunder. That night he writes an essay titled The Second Sun That Never Rose, wins a national prize, earns a scholarship to MIT. Years later he will help design a thorium reactor that cannot melt down, he will name it Sadako. The name will be forgotten in patent filings, but he will remember. Imagine the tension inside a submarine patrolling the Arctic in 2025. Its missiles carry warheads 80 times Hiroshima's yield. The captain, a film buff, screens Dr. Strangelove in the mess, laughter echoes off steel bulkheads. One sailor, 19, from a Nebraska farming town, asks, Sir, do we really launch if ordered? The captain replies, we hope never to find out. The boy writes in his journal, under this ice, the world is a marble we could drop and shatter. He seals the entry, slips it behind a panel. Decades later, decommissioned, the sub will become a museum, school children will read the journal, giggle at the profanity, skip the part about the marble. The ice above keeps melting, the missiles stay, the hope remains hypothetical. In 2023, a virtual reality experience titled Hiroshima 8/15 premieres at SXSW. Users don headsets, stand on a rendered AIOI bridge, watch a countdown. When the flash hits, screens white out, then fade to black. Some participants tear off headsets, vomit, others stand motionless, crying. A reviewer writes, technically impressive, emotionally manipulative. The developer, a Silicon Valley startup, pledges proceeds to peace education. Sales reach $4 million, donations total $120,000 after expenses. The CEO appears on a podcast, says, we gamified empathy. The host laughs, changes topic to cryptocurrency. Meanwhile, Hibakusha groups issue a statement, empathy is not a game. The statement is retweeted 5,000 times, lost in a feed of cat videos. The algorithm learns, the world scrolls on. It's hard to believe, but every year fewer survivors remain. When Akiko dies at 92, her funeral program bears a single sentence: "I folded paper until my fingers remembered the shape of peace." Attendees receive one last crane, printed on recycled paper, because even memory must be sustainable. A grandson live streams the service, viewers from 40 countries fold along in real time, creating a digital flock that hovers on screen like constellations. The feed ends with a QR code linking to a disarmament petition. Signatures climb, plateau, stall. The cranes, however, keep flying, gifts that loop forever, pixels that never age, unlike the voices they represent. Somewhere a server hums, a hard drive spins, a cloud stores paper birds that will never feel wind. Closing summary. We began this journey at 2:45 a.m. on a tarmac in Tinian, where a bomber lifted into moonlight carrying a package no one knew how to unwrap. We end in the present, where that package still sits, smaller now, sleeker, but packed with the same capacity to erase cities, stories, summers. Between those 2 points lie 200,000 immediate dead, countless slow deaths, shadows burned into stone, cranes folded into hope. We have walked with Akiko, with Sachiko, with soldiers who cheered and scientists who wept. We have stood beneath mushrooms that bloomed not from soil but from human ingenuity married to human failure. The question is not whether the bomb ended the war, the question is whether we ended the war that lives inside the bomb. Imagine the tension inside each of us when we hear a siren, see a headline, scroll past a mushroom cloud meme. We are all heirs to that August morning, citizens of a world perched forever at 8:15. The hands of the doomsday clock move by our choices, treaties signed or scrapped, leaders elected or tolerated, silences broken or preserved. Memory is not nostalgia, it is a shield we must reforge daily, lest it rust into complacency. The Hibakusha's voices grow faint, but their echo asks a single question: what will you do with the time that was bought by our ash? We cannot invent the sun we summoned, but we can decide how long it sets on our watch. Fold a crane, cast a vote, teach a child the half-life of both plutonium and prejudice. Write to a legislator, divest from weapons, invest in stories. Visit the museums, not to feel guilt but to carry weight, the kind that keeps conscience anchored when headlines scream for easy answers. Remember that every city is built on rivers of time, every bridge is an AIOI waiting to become a target or a testament. The choice is not between peace and war, it is between memory and forgetting. So as this episode closes, let the silence that follows be not emptiness but space, room for your own reflection, your own resolve. Picture Akiko's final crane taking flight from your open palm, not toward oblivion but toward tomorrow. If it reaches you, pass it on. If it falls, fold another. The paper is thin, the task immense, yet every flock begins with one crease, one breath, one refusal to let the light of August become routine. History is not a spectator sport, it is a relay of conscience. Run the next mile. The baton is warm, still warm, and waiting. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you made it this far, you're the reason we keep going. Please subscribe and help us continue sharing these stories with the world.